What if I told you that 4 days could change the rest of your life? That a stranger with a camera could walk into your quiet world and leave you forever transformed, not through passion or scandal, but through something far more profound. This is the story of Mariah, a village woman who made an impossible choice between love and duty, and how that choice echoed across 4 decades, touching hearts around the world. It's about the kind of love that doesn't demand everything, but remembers everything. A love story that began with a wrong turn and ended with a bridge that time could never destroy. She loved him for 4 days and remembered him for 40 years. The dry wind of Ndanzi village swept gently across the earth, lifting red dust in lazy spirals as if the land itself had paused to breathe. On most days, the world moved slowly here. Goats bleated, children chased tires down dusty paths, and the scent of roasted cassava filled the air long before sunset. It was not a place where strangers came, certainly not men with foreign accents and cameras hanging from their necks. But on that particular Wednesday afternoon, a faded green Land Rover rolled into the village square. Its tires crunched over loose gravel and came to a stop in front of a modest wooden sign, Mwanzi's Fresh Milk and Farm. Inside the house behind the sign, Mariah stirred maize porridge with the practiced rhythm of a woman who had lived the same life for 22 years. Her husband, Jonah, was out in the fields with their teenage son. Her daughter had married and moved to the city. And Mariah, now 45, spent her days tending chickens, boiling tea, and folding laundry with precise corners. Her life was quiet, respectable, predictable, until she heard the knock. Mariah wiped her hands on her wrapper and opened the door to see him. A tall, light-skinned man, maybe in his 50s, with tired blue eyes and a smile that didn't push too far. He wore a canvas jacket, khaki trousers, and a camera strap around his neck. "Sorry to bother you," he said gently. "I'm trying to find the Makamba Bridge, the wooden one that crosses the river east of here." Mariah blinked. "You drove past it." "I did?" he asked, chuckling awkwardly. "Could I trouble you for a cup of water and directions?" She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." His name was Edward Brooks. Born in Cape Town, now traveling across Africa, photographing the remnants of old traditions before they vanished under modernization. He wasn't like the men Mariah knew. He asked about her chickens, her garden, the sunflowers she had planted for no reason other than beauty. They sat on the veranda with chipped enamel mugs of tea. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was curious. "I've been alone a long time," he said, eyes scanning the hills. "Sometimes I wonder if I started this journey to find stories, or to run away from my own." Mariah said nothing, but her chest tightened. She knew that kind of silence. Her husband was not cruel, just absent, always working, always providing. But he never asked what made her laugh, never noticed when she stopped laughing altogether. Before he left, Edward asked, "May I take a picture of you?" Mariah laughed. "Of me? I'm no landmark." But something in his eyes made her pause. He wasn't seeing a subject, he was seeing her. She sat under the guava tree, wind lifting strands of hair from her scarf. He clicked the shutter just once. Then he said quietly, "You have the kind of face people don't forget." Mariah didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Edward came back, not to ask for directions, but to bring her a photo. He had developed it himself in a makeshift setup in the back of his Land Rover. When Mariah saw the image, something shifted in her. The woman in the photo looked peaceful, sad, but alive in a way she hadn't seen in herself in years. "I've seen bridges all over the continent," Edward said softly, "but I think I came here to find this." Mariah laughed. "To find a wooden bridge?" "No," he replied, looking at her. "To find someone who reminds me of everything I still believe in." They didn't touch, they didn't flirt, but as they walked to the bridge together, watching the sun glint off the water below, it became clear something rare had happened between them. That evening, Mariah cooked ugali and grilled tilapia. She wore a faded dress that hadn't left her cupboard in years. Her hands trembled as she set the table under the stars. Edward arrived with flowers he'd picked from the roadside. They talked for hours, about loss, about youth, about the fear of dying with parts of yourself never known by anyone. "I never married," Edward admitted. "Not because I didn't want to. I just never found someone who made me feel home." Mariah swallowed hard. "And now?" He smiled sadly. "Now I have, but it's only for one more day." They didn't kiss that night, but they sat close, shoulders touching as a moth circled the lantern light. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird sang. The next morning, the Land Rover was packed. Mariah stood at the gate, arms folded. "I suppose you found your bridge." He nodded, smiling tightly. "It's more than wood and rope now." Edward placed something in her hand, a small photo of the two of them he'd taken secretly when she wasn't looking. "I will never publish this," he said. "It's just for me, to remember you." Mariah blinked back tears. "I don't want to forget you either." "Then don't." He paused. "If I asked you to come with me," he whispered, "would you?" Mariah closed her eyes. She thought of Jonah, working in the fields. She thought of the village, the children who waved when she passed. She thought of the quiet woman she had become, and the woman who had briefly woken up inside her this week. And then she said the only thing that felt honest, "No, but I will remember you every day." Edward nodded. He got into the Land Rover. He drove away, and Mariah stood there, holding the photograph to her chest like it was a heartbeat. Mariah didn't cry when Edward drove away. Not when the dust of his tires settled, or when she returned to the kitchen and saw the second cup of tea still warm on the tray. But something inside her, something small and soft, had torn quietly, like fabric snagged on a nail. She folded the photograph he gave her and placed it in the back of her Bible behind the story of Ruth. Then she boiled water for her husband's bath. Life resumed. She cooked, cleaned, and fed the goats, but her eyes often wandered to the road. A week later, while sitting on their bamboo bench, Jonah, her husband, spoke without looking at her. "Who was that man that kept coming around?" Mariah didn't flinch. "A traveler, photographer. He was looking for the bridge." Jonah nodded slowly. He asked around town. Some people said they saw him sitting with you by the river. Silence. "Did he take your picture?" Mariah's breath caught. "Yes." Jonah chewed the edge of his fingernail, then stood. He didn't speak of it again, but something had shifted between them, something that neither love nor tradition could mend. Months passed, then a year, then 3. On the 3rd anniversary of the day they met, Mariah did something she had never done before. She wrote a letter. "Dear Edward, you asked if I would come with you. I said no, and I meant it. But every day since, I've wondered what would have happened if I had said yes. I live in 2 worlds now. One is here, with the sounds of chickens, the laughter of grandchildren, the weight of duty. The other is that bridge, that laugh, that photo. You taught me that I could still be seen, still be loved. I don't know where this letter will go, but I hope somehow you'll feel it. Mariah." She placed the letter in an envelope, wrote his name on the front, but she had no address, no country, only silence. She placed the letter in a biscuit tin, folded alongside a pressed flower from the day he left, and she locked it in the top drawer of her sewing chest. Jonah never asked again about the man, but he became gentler after that year. Perhaps he knew, perhaps he had always known, or perhaps, in his own way, he had loved Mariah more than he knew how to express. When he passed in his sleep during the planting season of 1992, Mariah wept, quietly, respectfully, like a woman saying goodbye to a season. She was 58. She sold some of the land, kept the goats, and took in sewing work. Her children visited often, but none of them ever saw the letter. None of them knew about the man who taught her how to feel again. In 2001, a young woman arrived at Mariah's door. She wore jeans, held a microphone, and introduced herself as Linda, a Kenyan journalist working on a documentary about vanishing cultures. She said she was tracing the footsteps of a South African photographer who had done a similar journey in the 1970s. "His name was Edward Brooks," she said. "He was my mentor before he died last year." Mariah's hands trembled slightly. "I know him," she whispered. Linda's eyes widened. "You knew him?" Mariah nodded, then brought out the old photo, the one Edward had given her and one she had never shown to anyone. Linda gasped. "That's his style. That's his handwriting on the back." Linda returned weeks later with a gift, a hardcover book titled Bridges Across a Continent. It was filled with Edward's photographs, taken across rural Africa between 1974 and 1980. There, on page 48, was a photo of a river. Page 49, a wooden bridge. Page 50, a distant figure in a scarf standing under a guava tree, no name. Just the caption, "She reminded me what love is." Mariah placed her hand on the page, and for the first time in 27 years, she cried. Linda promised to include Mariah in the documentary, a final tribute to Edward's journey. Mariah, now 73, agreed, quietly. But one evening she opened her sewing chest and removed the biscuit tin. Inside was the yellowed letter, still sealed. She handed it to Linda. Would you read this at the end of your film? Linda nodded, tears in her eyes. I think he would have liked that. When the documentary aired 2 years later, Echoes of the Road, it ended with a black screen and Mariah's voice reading the letter over soft piano music. Audiences across Africa wept. Online comments poured in. I've never cried this much over a story I didn't know. 4 days and a lifetime of meaning. I'll never look at a photograph the same again. The story of the woman by the bridge went viral, not because it was loud, but because it was real, quiet, and eternal. By the time Mariah turned 86, her bones had grown softer, but her voice remained firm. She still watered her sunflowers every morning, sitting in her cane chair with a mug of hot cocoa balanced on one thigh. Her favorite companion was her grandson, Aaron, who had come to stay with her during his university holidays. At 17, Aaron had the stillness of a river and the soul of someone much older than his years. He listened more than he spoke, and when he smiled, it was always with his eyes. One rainy afternoon, while dusting her bookshelf, Aaron found the hardcover photo book, Bridges Across a Continent. He flipped through the pages, then stopped. Grandma, he said softly, holding the book open. Is this you? Mariah looked up from her knitting. Her heart skipped. There it was, page 50, her photo, the guava tree, the scarf, the caption, scarf. She nodded slowly. Yes, that's me. Aaron tilted his head. Who was he? Mariah took a deep breath. A man who came to this village for 4 days, but stayed in my heart for the rest of my life. That night, Aaron sat by the fireplace, notebook in hand, as Mariah told him the full story for the first time. I was a wife, a mother, but I had forgotten I was also a woman. Edward reminded me. She explained the letter, the photograph, the bridge, the ache of choosing duty over desire. Aaron wrote every word. Did you love him? He asked quietly. She stared into the flames, not in the way people write poems about, not in the way movies show. But yes, I loved him. I still do, but it was the kind of love that asks for nothing. Aaron looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You were brave, he whispered. Mariah shook her head. Number, I was afraid, but even fear has its own story to tell. 2 weeks later, a package arrived from Nairobi. Inside was a DVD, a handwritten note, and a silver USB. It was from Linda. The documentary, Echoes of the Road, had been submitted to a European film festival. It had won a humanitarian storytelling award. Thousands of letters had poured in. People from all over the world were asking about the woman by the bridge. Mariah's letter had been translated into French, Spanish, and even Mandarin. One quote had gone viral. You taught me that I could still be seen, still be loved. Aaron read it aloud. Mariah wept quietly. That night, she had a dream. She was standing by the Makamba Bridge again. But this time, the river was clear, the sun was warm, and Edward stood on the far side, smiling. She walked toward him. He didn't move. But as she stepped onto the wooden planks, she felt her body grow lighter. Her cane dropped. Her feet no longer ached. Her scarf floated behind her like wings. She reached him. He took her hand, and then she woke. One morning, Aaron came rushing in from the post office. Grandma, there's something you need to see. He handed her a second envelope from Linda. Inside was an old scanned photograph. It was Edward, standing in front of the same bridge. But this time, he wasn't alone. In his hand, he held a photograph, the same picture of Mariah that he'd taken decades ago. Linda's letter explained. This photo was found in Edward's last roll of film, developed posthumously. He had returned to the bridge in 1991, just before he passed. The only thing in his hand was your image. Mariah placed the photograph on her lap. She didn't speak for a long time. Then softly she said, he came back. As her health began to fade, Mariah asked Aaron for only one thing. When I go, she said, bury me with the photograph. And the letter Aaron agreed. But he had another plan. He digitized the entire story. He uploaded the full narrative, voice recordings, pictures, letter scans, documentary clips, on a website he titled The Bridge That Held Her Heart. Within a week, it was shared across the globe. Newspapers picked it up, relationship podcasts reviewed it, celebrities quoted it. One director even announced plans to adapt it into a film. Before Mariah passed peacefully in her sleep one morning at the age of 95, Aaron sat beside her and whispered, "Your story is changing the world." She smiled faintly, her hand resting on the book with the bridge photo. "I only wanted it to change. One heart." Aaron held her hand until it grew still. And when the village gathered to mourn her, they didn't just speak of her cooking or her kindness. They spoke of love, the kind that doesn't seek attention, the kind that waits in silence, the kind that walks away when it must, but never really leaves. Mariah was laid to rest one golden morning beneath the guava tree behind her home, where Edward had once taken her photo so many decades before. The funeral was simple, just the way she wanted. No loud speeches, no titles, just stories. Aaron stood at the head of her resting place, holding the letter and photo pressed close to his chest. When it was time, he stepped forward and knelt. Gently, he placed the items into the earth. "She carried this love quietly," he said, voice trembling, but it was never small. As the soil covered her, a light breeze passed through the leaves above, and a single guava fruit dropped softly beside her grave. A month later, Aaron made the trip his grandmother never took. He visited the Makamba Bridge. It had aged, some planks replaced, some parts reinforced, but it still stood, still beautiful, still holding the memories of two souls who had never crossed it together, but whose hearts had once met at its edge. He brought with him a laminated copy of the photograph Edward had taken of Mariah, and he nailed it gently to the wooden post at the entrance of the bridge, where passers-by could see. He didn't leave a caption, just one word carved beneath it: loved. 2 years after Mariah's death, Aaron received a message from a woman in Cape Town. Her name was Alana Brooks, Edward's niece. She had come across Aaron's website after seeing a tweet that had gone viral. She wrote, "I always wondered if my uncle ever found someone who understood him. He was a quiet man, never married, but I remember him looking out the window sometimes with a softness in his eyes, like he was remembering someone. He had a box, a wooden box we weren't allowed to open. After he died, we found only one thing inside, her photo. Now I know her name was Mariah." Aaron sat in silence after reading it, for a long time. Then he added Alana's letter to the website, at the very end. The story of Edward and Mariah continued to spread, passed from mother to daughter, from teacher to student, from lover to stranger. It became a favorite podcast episode, a theater monologue, a spoken word performance in Johannesburg, a mural on a classroom wall in Nairobi. People connected to the idea of love that never shouted, but stayed. Love that let go, not because it was weak, but because it was honorable. Love that bloomed and faded in 4 days, but echoed across 4 decades. On what would have been Mariah's 100th birthday, Aaron returned to the bridge. Now a man in his 30s, he had married. He had children, but his heart always made space for this story. He sat at the edge of the river and opened a small leather notebook. He wrote, "To my grandmother, Mariah, you taught me what love looks like when no one is watching, what it means to feel deeply but speak gently, what it means to walk away from a dream and still treasure it without bitterness. You once said you didn't want your story to change the world, just one heart. It changed mine." He stood, kissed the breeze, and walked back across the bridge. Behind him, the wind picked up slightly. A loose page fluttered free from the notebook and sailed across the water. It landed softly on the far side of the bank, right where Edward had once stood. And though they never crossed that bridge together, their hearts had built one that time, distance, and even death could never tear down. We tell stories that heal, challenge, and inspire. If this one moved you, type "I felt it" in the comments, and let's talk about it below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Real stories, real hearts,